Hello, and thank you for joining us today on the Percolata podcast. I'm Greg Tanaka, founder and CEO of Percolata, and today we're interviewing a seasoned retail executive, Craig Levra. Craig Levra led Sport Chalet from 1997 until May 2015. Initially as president and chief operating officer, he was elected to the board of directors in 1998 and as chairman and CEO from 2001 until the sale of Sport Chalet. Under Mr. Levra's leadership, the company grew from 18 to 55 full-service stores, generating over $400 million in annual revenue, with 3,000 highly trained employee experts and 1,000 product vendors serving 2.7 million customers. He led the transformation of the small business into a successfully publicly traded, NASDAQ-traded specialty retailer focused on utilizing technology to deliver second-to-none customer engagement. Strategic initiatives initiated by the company during his tenure include the implementation of an enterprise-wide ERP IT platform, SAP, the opening of a new distribution center with a new warehouse management system, implementation of CRM. During his tenure, Sport Chalet was twice named one of America's best 200 small companies by Forbes magazine, and based on its ability to deliver against consumers' needs and desires, was ranked as the nation's most desired retailer in the U.S. by Kanbay Research Institute. In addition, Sport Chalet earned the ICSC Silver Award for outstanding customer-facing store design with the opening of the company's NextGen concept in downtown Los Angeles. Craig, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much.
So, Craig, how were you able to transform Sport Chalet from a small family business to a large, successful retailer?
Well, we undertook a number of initiatives when I joined the company. We were relatively small. We had gone public a few years earlier and highly entrepreneurial, centered on customer service and customer engagement. So the underlying culture was very strong. What we lacked was really data and technology to lead us to the next level and get on to high-speed growth. So one of the first steps we undertook was to engage in strategic planning to understand our system's capabilities and needs, really begin to synthesize processes, and look for ways that we could drop dollars to the bottom line while increasing engagement with our clients and consumers that love shopping with Sport Chalet. And that got us down a path of focused growth, selecting the correct real estate, understanding how technology played a role in our customers' lives. Really spent quite a bit of time looking at the level of training and service we were offering our clients and our customers on our selling floors. Did we have the right people? Were they trained to sell very expensive, specialty outdoor and athletic gear? And as we morphed the business model to take a leadership position with first to market in performance technology and lifestyle merchandise, and the services to back that up, whether it was ski and snowboard repair or teaching consumers how to scuba dive or lining fishing reels, on and on. We really had to have the best experts on the floor and make sure they were available when our clients expected them to be there. So a lot of heavy lifting, but all in all, a great deal of excitement and fun, and the results speak for themselves.
Interesting change, right? Because the idea was, well, you don't need a brick and mortar store. You just buy everything online. It gets delivered to your door. Why have these traditional pure play online retailers open brick and mortar stores?
Well, I think everybody realizes, everybody in retail that touches a consumer today realizes there is some physicality, right? It has to be there. There's a great book that a board member wrote that I think everybody would enjoy reading. I certainly did, named Free, Perfect, and Now by a man named Rob Roden. The challenge he presented was today's customers want products or services free, they want it perfect, and they want it now. So when you take those three premises in place and you say what has the ability to deliver at least the perfect, the free part's a little tough, but the perfect and the now, well, nothing means now better than pulling into a store and walking out with an item that you want or need that particular day. The perfect really lies in what Amazon's been able to do and other great online retailers and the perfection of the delivery of the shopping and the delivery mechanism, right? So everything in this world is becoming a buy button. Amazon is there along with some others. And I think individual customer behavior, nobody wakes up in the morning and says, gosh, I need to go do some online shopping today, or I need to do some mobile shopping today, or I need to go get this, right? It's, I need to buy this. And what comes to mind next is, what are my best chances of getting it? And what's the lead time for the need, right? So it's an automatic click. and it's a simple reorder on a website, great. If it's, hey, I've got to go try something on, or I want to touch this fabric before I give it to a family member as a gift, then that changes the conversation pretty radically. But this channel segregation that existed for so many years inside of most retail organizations, large and small, has thankfully and with great relief all been merged together so that the experience is agnostic. The brand's got to be consistent across all the platforms. And the experience should be high touch, irrespective if it's in person with a delivery service or from an online perspective. And so that great morphing together of all of these tools and all of these behaviors is really just following where customers want to go. So it's going to be obsolete. Obsolete stores will fail, however, and online will continue to grow, but it won't grow forever unless it continues to morph and change, which it is. And so it makes retail fundamentally exciting because you really are dealing with individual consumer behavior. That kind of adds more pressure to what happens inside of a particular store, right? There's never been greater pressure on retailers today for cost control than there is right now. Margins are getting squeezed. Top line inside of stores themselves continue to struggle from an overall industry perspective. 2 or 3% same store sales growth is a good win given what's going on today. And so that puts more pressure on the operations and scheduling teams to make sure that they've got exactly the right people at exactly the right stations at exactly the right times to make sure that when a client comes in, properly staffed in footwear with knowledgeable and trained experts. In our case, that was our role. If you've got a business that experiences choppy behavior in a particular category or two, or seasonally adjusts, and a temperature change means that seasonal adjustment has to take place in a more accelerated fashion, then that has to be there as well. And that kind of goes back to utilizing technology in the web for outstanding ways to think about measuring customer input and flow through inside of a given building. So important today. And then making sure you're staffed correctly. It's the Goldilocks principle, right? You don't want it too hot and you don't want it too cold. In other words, not too much or not too little. Either way, you're going to lose. So it goes back to having exactly the right people in exactly the right departments at exactly the right times to meet customer demand, which is, by the way, constantly changing. It's a very difficult but very interesting problem to attack.
Sure. So is your view that in terms of the future of retail, that's not going to be just online or just offline? It's going to be this, what everyone's saying, omni-channel?
Yeah, and I'm not even, that's exactly right. And I'm not even sure that I even enjoy using the word omni-channel anymore. It has to be an immersive experience, right? And it has to, and it is driven today by technology, right? Who gets in their car today and goes to look for an item that, let's say, is over $50 or $100 that doesn't, they have to go to a store that doesn't check first to make sure that item is in stock, right? If you're on a mission to go buy something, whether it's a toner cartridge or, in my case, I need a new crampons for ice climbing. You want to make sure those items are in stock in your size before you make the drive over to try them on and fit them out and make sure that they're correct. And if you can wait a few days, then online's clearly an alternative. So I think that portion of it has changed pretty dramatically. And again, the most successful retailers globally understand that, believe in it, and have restructured their teams and their organizational charts to make sure that happens. One of our executives at National Retail Federation, Vicki Cantrell, has written a brilliant white paper on the study 2 years ago about how retail organizations have morphed and changed to elevate the role of mobile and digital marketing and merchandising within organizations, and in many cases now lead the organizations or the stores teams. If there is a separate structure, in many cases fall into second place because they understand the importance of presenting merchandise correctly on a website. Shopping experience that makes it fun and focused, and the assortment's there, but the clutter isn't. And that's an Amazon beater, in my opinion. So the more retail thinks about that and investigates these new opportunities and looks down a path of excitement, I think the better future there is. And those that can't or won't eventually aren't going to make it.
So Craig, as we think about the changing landscape in these physical retail stores and the role that they're playing, what role does the sales associate play? Typically, labor is almost half the operating budget for most retailers, and so it's a pretty big line item. And so, what roles do they play in this kind of evolving landscape?
So you're right, it is a big alignment. It's occupancy and labor expense are the two major expense lines. And at every board meeting or every executive meeting, those two are discussed on a regular basis, as all of our listeners know. It depends on the strategy. If your strategy is that you are a stack them and sell them strategy, that the level of customer engagement other than checkout doesn't have to be there, then in a sense, payroll becomes a commodity and you manage it as such. It takes X number of units to move product from a truck onto the selling floor onto a shelf, and X number of units, X number of employees to check somebody out at the front registers. If the experience is engaging, if you're selling high-end technical services or very expensive product or a luxury environment, that experience changes pretty dramatically, and it can add, countless minutes, if not hours, to an overall selling process and makes that equation a lot more difficult to fundamentally understand and manage. And retailers that span across the country and that have different assortments, even the strategy might be the same, but different assortments or different categories on a by location basis really struggle with this because it can't be a one-size-fits-all attack on managing labor and managing scheduling appropriately. So if the product is high priced, consumers expect knowledge on the floor that's every bit as good as typically what they have internally. I can explain the differences and features and benefits in a meaningful way, ask the right questions in a meaningful way for those clients. And typically those are higher priced associates that may or may not be on commission that have earned the pay, arguably, given their level of training and expertise. And that presents one set of challenges. And then there is a different tier where, again, it's more self-select and self-serve, where you have a different level of engagement that's expected by consumers. But the other piece of that too, Greg, is the sales associates' ability to quickly utilize technology. Is everybody armed with an iPad? Is everybody armed with a mobile? If an item's missing or out of stock in a particular size, you have to walk all the way to the front to try to find it in another location or from the warehouse or the online store? Or can an associate pull out a mobile device, do a quick look up and say, we don't have your size here, but we've got the store 5 miles away. I can have it shipped to your home later this afternoon. If you'd like, or we can hold it for you to pick up. So that level of engagement, I think overall really impresses customers, and data suggests that if you're a retailer that's out of stock of a particular size or color, and you have the ability to instantaneously find it at another location and complete the sale in the store, even though the product isn't physically available, the average order value actually improves by more than 10%. To say nothing of how happy that customer is and how often they'll come back.
Sure, that makes a lot of sense. So it sounds like in these kind of experiential situations where the sales associate is really, better trained and is supposed to help educate customers, how does a retailer evaluate these kind of employees, and how do they know who to staff on the selling floor at any given time?
Well, every company does it slightly differently. I know one of the ways that we've seen it done the best is going through a series of employee training and development workshops that are technically focused. And in our case at Sport Chalet, because we use the nomenclature, the home of the experts, we really had to make sure that everybody on our floor was an expert. And so there were 35 separate certifications to become a certified expert in a category, many requiring hands-on tests, certification proof. A lot of what we sold could get an individual killed if the gear or the instruction wasn't correct. So it was extremely important to us, and those series of tests and clinics and networks were driven at a very high level, and we had a 30% failure rate. Right? I think that employees wouldn't pass their test on the first time by a tune of 30%. So we made it extremely rigorous and extremely difficult, but when they were through it and done, then we had recurrent training and took it forward. And I think you think about any high-touch service environment. So if you're in the automobile parts industry, and part of that component is automobile service, and you have every type of car, every make under the planet rolling in for some kind of service, that's a different level of training that is required and puts pressure on those organizations. Same thing if you're, let's say, in the jewelry business and the cuts and clarity of diamonds and jewelry and how to be certified in that category and run it. Food service industry, exactly the same way. So every industry and every player within a segment of the industry has different staffing needs and different levels of expertise required. And again, what's exciting today, and part of what drove our growth as we thought about technology at Sport Chalet, was the standard expensive behemoth solutions great as they are, aren't necessarily the correct way to go in terms of the size of the business you have and the speed that you want to get things done. So the good news is there's plenty of young companies that utilize technology available in the cloud and on the web to really deliver greater results faster, easier to understand, ultimately better metrics. Percolata being one of those, of course, that can really help retailers understand the dynamics of payroll, the dynamics of scheduling, and the dynamics of sales expertise when and where it's required, and deliver on that promise. So retailers have a better chance of scheduling exactly the right employees at exactly the right times when demand is there and delighting customers. And then because you've got fewer customers, let's say per employee on aggregate, typically, and so you have a chance to be a lot more engaging. You're not juggling 3 or 4 customers at once, can ask more questions, can suggest more add-ons, and I think that's one way to do it. Ultimately, there'll be a way, and I think there's a couple of retailers out there that are already doing it, Uber being one. I consider Uber a retailer, where you do an instantaneous rating of how was your service today. And I'm surprised more retailers haven't adopted that when you walk out of a physical location, you're not getting a quick notification and saying, hey, how do we do to understand Greg in footwear, brought your shoes and also check you out. So how did Greg perform today? 1 to 5 stars. And Uber's doing it, right? So many others are doing it. So why aren't more retailers doing it exactly the same way? And so that delight measure, if you will, 1 to 5 stars, sounds to me like it would be something very easy to do across all major retailers. In real time, you can measure what's going on in a particular store. Is the engagement level up? Is the engagement level down? And then try to figure out if it's down, what's going on and why, and address it that day.
Sure, that makes sense. A lot of retailers measure net promoter scores, right? They do surveys and try to sample customers, right, to measure is experience good or not. But you bring up a really good topic, which is, I think a lot of traditional ways of measuring retail performance has been dollars per square foot, right? With like some retailers like Apple, Tiffany's, where they have amazing dollars per square foot. But I think as I hear you talking, I think one concept I've been hearing about recently is this concept of experience per square foot, right? Trying to maximize not necessarily the dollars per square foot, because someone might buy it online or might buy it in the store, but maybe what really matters is the experience, right? To really maximize the experience. How do you see that? I mean, that unfortunately, that metric is a very hard metric to measure, unlike dollars. Dollars are very concrete and quantitative, but experience is not. I mean, you can do surveys, but if retailers are really trying to go after this, for the physical stores, maximizing the experience per square foot, how do you think they actually can measure it in a scalable way?
Well, there are a number of companies out there that do a great job in measuring experience and getting those surveys back. Here's the metric I would argue that could be most beneficial. I would think lifetime value of an individual customer would be the best way to measure the experience, right? Because not every shopping trip results in a purchase, nor should it. Despite the growth of online car buying, there's still that component of just looking through before you actually purchase a car, test driving 3 or 4 models, and start to think about a future purchase or a future lease. I think that drills down to the luxury segment of retail in a way that's also very, very meaningful in terms of how to think about that. We would constantly stress that all of those visits in October and early November, if they didn't result in a sale, that we shouldn't be upset about that, because hopefully it was a lot of pre-holiday shopping for those who had time to do so. I know that sounds, a touch outdated, but I think it's still applicable in some respects. Getting ideas for your family on what they might want for holiday season or gift-giving season in advance of actually making the purchase. And you could argue you can do it online just as easily as walking into a physical store. But I think that piece is important. There are multiple companies out there that do a great job on customer surveys, both real time and after the fact. And I think there are ways to think about that overall. And then we have this wonderful engine called Yelp that allows everybody to express their pleasure or displeasure real time. And another way of measuring overall engagement and how an individual service or retail provider is delivering on that engagement.
Yeah, I've heard of some retailers where they'll come up like with composite scores of using Yelp ratings, Net Promoter scores, a secret shopper, and come up with a composite score for stores. Do you see that to be becoming more prevalent in physical retail?
There's no question about it. Physical and online retail both, right? So I think when you look at that and you look at the survey results, the promotion scores overall, we would run weekly Yelp scores against weekly comps to look at the correlation and against payroll percents, right? And to look at all that data accordingly to say, were we too tight on payroll? Were we too long on payroll? How was the experience? Were we spot on right or not? And all of that's, super, super important, understanding there's always an outlier, positive and negative, and you have to kind of weigh against the overall composite score to make sure you're not knee-jerking a reaction due to one review, good or bad. But there's no shortage of data, right, today, in today's world. So if you say you don't have data on something, shame on you. There's no shortage of data. It's how do you synthesize that data and put it in a meaningful format that your teams can take action on. Whether it's the store teams, the customer service teams as engaged in individual customer service around loyalty programs, or certainly the online and digital experience, or customer service teams and ancillary services that you might provide, whether it's instructions or rentals or repairs. All those add up, and the best retailers have a way to measure those and take action appropriately. The tools are there. So more pressure to do so, but I think, again, with the newer tools that are more nimble and more agile and better understand how behavior takes place and the challenges of human behavior, not only on the client side, but certainly on the employee side. There is some element of, because you're dealing with human beings, it's an imperfect world, and you have to build a little room in there for imperfections in behavior, and you have to build that model in, or build that component into labor scheduling, and adds more challenges. But there are certainly tools like Percolata that can address that issue and make that sales team very powerful and very effective.
I think your comment about the staffing between locations is actually quite interesting. I was reading about how Zara, which is one of the leading apparel retailers, how one of the key strengths was their ability to actually staff between stores, and so that they had essentially a bigger pool of labor to play with when they actually staffed. So that kind of makes a lot of sense, and I think it's probably going to be more common as people adopt systems that actually have that capability.
I think you're right, and I think in the case of Zara, it really gives those employees that are willing to do that a real path to the future in terms of moving up into management, really going forward, becoming full-time employees. I'm not sure this whole push on making everybody a part-time employee is exactly right, given you want to build an infrastructure and a base for growth, right? And that means more hours, not less, more training, not less. And, not for everybody, but for the right team of leaders that you're building for the future. And that scheduling flexibility allows you to have, from a pure human resource management perspective, the ability to create the next round of leaders, assistant general managers and district managers and on in the corporate. You have the ability to create that right path. And again, those right tools can help you set, here are my stars, and these are the ones that are going to take precedence, and these are the ones that we want to move up in management. And that creates excitement and enthusiasm inside any organization, the chance to grow and do better.
So it sounds like one of the key things to forecasting is really to know how many customers there are. And, today a lot of enterprise retailers have some sort of traffic sensor, traffic counter. In my experience in talking to retailers, it seems like a lot of retailers may not actually have that hooked up to their forecasting service, or maybe they don't even have, especially as you go to mid-market, smaller retailers, a lot of them don't even have any sort of traffic counters. Why do you think that it's so common that we've just been talking for the past half hour or so about the importance of really making sure you have the right people there at the right time and the right number, but so many retailers actually seem to not actually have that, the complete loop, right? Where you know how many customers there are, you feed that into forecast, then you staff against that. Why do you think it's even in this day and age, 2016? Why is it so common, especially among the small and mid-market retailers? For them, it's difficult for them to actually have this kind of complete loop, so that can really provide the best customer service.
Greg, that's an excellent question. My fundamental belief on that issue is that many retailers haven't been exposed to the right kind of systems that allow them to extrapolate the data correctly. And that whether you've used either visual means to measure customer throughput exclusively, or physical means, in other words, number of footsteps on a particular pad as customers walk into a location, use those individual metrics as a standalone, the results have come back very inconclusive and therefore very choppy, and more importantly, not tied back into a labor scheduling system. Oftentimes, the marketing teams will push harder for customer counts than the operations team or the merchandising team, simply because they want to prove that the marketing initiatives that they have in place are driving consumers into a particular location or onto a particular website. Whether an actual transaction takes place is up to the operators, if you will, the website or the management teams of an individual. The conversion ratio is so critical. And when you think about retail, and whether it's self-serve or full-serve or luxury or opening price point, it's a whole lot different than if you're running a stadium, right? Where every consumer walking in has a ticket. A ticket is scanned. You pass through a detector. You go through a turnstile, and you know the exact attendance, right? And you know exactly how many people walked in at any given point in time. Same thing in an amusement park at Disneyland or Disney World. Exactly the same metrics. So they have arguably a leg up on those of us who are in traditional retail, where you don't have that individual ticket-taking experience taking place. A whole team can walk in, a group of friends can walk in, a whole family can walk in. You may have one buying unit comprised of 2, 4, 6, 8 people. They're going to buy one thing or collection of things, and how do you amalgamate that group against an individual who walks in? And typically, because retailers have only gone down one individual measuring piece and not tied that back in correctly to scheduling or to the operations portion of the business, operating metrics, the results have been inconclusive and choppy, and hence the enthusiasm isn't there in the way you think it might be. That has as high a degree of direct consumer penetration as does sport. And I'll give you an example. If you visit a Bed Bath & Beyond, you think about Bed Bath & Beyond, right? Most of their larger competitors have gone away. So if you're running Bed Bath & Beyond, you're thinking about Amazon, Target, some of the traditional department stores, but there's nobody really left, right, that has your model. If you're in the office supply world with the consolidation there, they're down to 1 or 2 major players. And again, Amazon and some of the online retailers, there's nobody left. But you can't go to a Kyocera store. You can't go really to a Rubbermaid store. You don't go to a Fieldcrest store unless it's one of the outlet malls. But there's a whole level of engagement at a Nike location with the multiple tiers, a whole level of engagement at North Face locations or Under Armour locations. And online, even more impressive in terms of the brand building stories and the full assortment of product being offered online. So it's a different animal entirely, highly fragmented. The vendors as well as retailers, digital and physical, are all competing for a rather stagnant customer base in terms of number of new entrants versus each year versus those who fall out of the category. And so it's a completely different dynamic, and arguably makes it a very tough industry to compete against because there are so many moving pieces. Now, the good news is, because it's so highly fragmented, there's no clear-cut winner. Those that operate in the mall, there are winners and losers there, and all you have to do is look at the public reporting that indicates that. Same thing with those that operate larger formats also in mall or in suburban centers, power centers. And then there's the whole, on mountain experience. There's a whole at the ocean experience if you're into stand-up paddleboarding or water sports or surf or scuba. And the bicycle industry fundamentally is healthy still at the IBD level, although that's starting to show some erosion. So it's fundamentally different. It's fundamentally more fragmented, and therefore there's great opportunity for those who operate at a very high level of execution, and really tremendous risk for those who don't. Either they don't have the right strategy wrapped around best employee utilization and best use of data and metrics, or those who can't accurately and convincingly chart a course towards the future and push that organization forward towards that future.